Believe it or not, the Nintendo Switch 2 is already 6 months old. For years now, players have been speculating, hyping, and wondering when a successor to Nintendo's 2017 record-breaking and industry-shaking hybrid device would finally arrive. Well, 2025 was finally the year. Has the hardware lived up to the hype? Is it worth picking up after 6 months? Let's find out. Leading up to the launch of Nintendo Switch 2, there was a whole lot of controversy from a launch lineup that didn't have much beyond Mario Kart World to charging for an instruction manual and the dreaded nightmare of game collectors, the Game Key card. A whole lot of people were making a big fuss about this handheld. The loudest criticisms targeted the asking price of $449.99 US for the basic version of the console and a $499.99 version, which included Mario Kart World, a $30 value roughly before tax. But despite all this controversy, several Nintendo Directs full of text walls that just screamed lower the price, and an overall insistence that nobody wanted this thing, the Nintendo Switch 2 has rapidly outpaced nearly any other console we've seen launch in modern history. Today, 6 months later, the Nintendo Switch 2 is the fastest selling console in US history and is currently sitting at 10.36 million units sold as of September 2025. It hasn't passed the 13 million lifetime sales the Wii U saw. Nintendo, get it together, we gotta get those numbers up. Speaking of numbers up, the other major controversy regarding pricing was Nintendo opening the floodgates for $80 video games. As of right now, there are only 4 physical Nintendo Switch 2 games that come in at an $80 asking price, those being Mario Kart World, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Kirby and Forgotten Land, and the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of Super Mario Party Jamboree. Based on the number of Switch 2 games available and how many have hit this $80 price tag, it does seem that this is more of an exception than the rule currently. It's also worth noting these Nintendo-published Switch 2 editions of Switch games come bundled in with an expansion on the base game's content. And as far as the floodgates being opened for other publishers to come in with $80 games, we saw Xbox loudly claim every major Xbox game would be $80 before quickly learning that you're not Mario Kart Outer Worlds 2. Following this launch window, brand new Nintendo games like Kirby Air Riders, Pokémon Legends ZA, and Donkey Kong Bonanza have all maintained the expected MSRP of $69.99 US. In fact, the only standard base edition of a game for the Switch 2 that costs $80 in the US is Mario Kart World. So far, out of the 10.36 million consoles sold, about 9.5 million copies of Mario Kart World have also been sold, leading to a historic attach rate for this game. So outside of selling well, in spite of the negative conversation some say doomed the road to this hardware launch, how is the console as a piece of tech? Well, if you ask me, the device itself is actually fairly comfortable to use. While it is larger than the Nintendo Switch and lacks the ergonomics of something like a Steam Deck, playing handheld mode on the Nintendo Switch 2 is something I still find myself doing regularly, especially when playing RPGs, where I can spend time grinding or side questing pretty casually. Plus, if your hands get tired, the kickstand also functions as a makeshift pop socket. Pretty neat. So what about the performance? How is the console running games 6 months removed from launch? Well, so far, we've seen the custom NVIDIA chipset deployed in the new Nintendo Hybrid flex pretty early, with a game like Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition coming in at launch, running and looking nicer than it does on the much more expensive Steam Deck. Thanks to modern affordances and a custom version of NVIDIA's DLSS upscaling, games like Cyberpunk are proof that when a team wants to make a showpiece work on Nintendo's hardware, they can get it done. Now, obviously, games like Cyberpunk or Star Wars Outlaws, despite being very respectable ports, taking advantage of the hardware on offer with the Switch 2, won't look as good as a dedicated home console or a PC. But as somebody who has put a lot of time into my Switch 2 as well as my Steam Deck, players who really enjoy the conveniences and affordances of modern PC and modern handheld gaming know what they're getting into, and are largely okay with the game having a lower resolution or running at 40 frames per second instead of 60, so long as it means they get it on the go. And so far, the Switch 2 has delivered a fairly good experience for a lot of these big, heavy games. It isn't all flawless, however. We've seen some growing pains with the backwards compatibility that Nintendo employs to get our Switch 1 library playable on Switch 2. Thankfully, they've launched a handy website which details how well a specific game works for Switch 2 and any known issues, but new firmware updates are coming along to help remedy some of the known issues for big games. Just recently, we saw an update pushed that fixed the issues with Nier Automata. By and large, backwards compatibility with the Switch 1 works like a charm on Switch 2. And in a lot of cases, many Switch 1 games have been patched for free to take advantage of the power of the new hardware. This year, I've spent a significant amount of time going back to my Switch library. I replayed The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the remake from 2019, stuttering and frame rate issues seen consistently on the Switch completely gone on Switch 2. With HDR support, 60 FPS, and a much sharper image overall, this is my go-to recommendation for people seeking a classic Zelda experience on Switch 2. Third and first-party titles alike have seen various updates to take advantage of certain features of the Switch 2, like HDR or the 120Hz display, and the power that can push games to hit double their original frame rates in some cases. And if you want to throw out a little cash, games like The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land received paid updates, which turned them into Switch 2 editions, both looking and running better, and getting some bonus content. But how is the Switch 2 faring when it comes to exclusives 6 months out? Are any of them worth picking up a system for? Strictly looking at new games that are only playable on the Nintendo Switch 2. So far from Nintendo, we've seen Mario Kart World, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Dragon Drive, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, and Kirby Air Riders. For the most part, all of these titles have been received positively, with games like Mario Kart World and DK Bonanza even garnering some attention at the Game Awards 2025. On the software front, the Switch 2 has pretty much carried on the burning hot streak Nintendo found with the life cycle of the Nintendo Switch. Wasting no time at all, the new hardware has already delivered a handful of exclusives that offer a good variety, from racing to local multiplayer, and the promise of more to come in the near future. In addition to these console exclusives, the Switch 2 has become the best place to play some cross-generation Nintendo exclusives from this year as well. Games like Pokémon Legends ZA and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond have, for all intents, found themselves as pillars of the Nintendo Switch 2 Year 1 lineup, despite also releasing for the Nintendo Switch. The Switch family of consoles is also the only place you're able to play other major games like Hades 2 on console, at least for now. We saw the Nintendo Switch grow to be a bit of a haven for indies, and it seems already that this reputation is continuing in this new generation. So for fans of Nintendo software, after 6 months there is plenty to play, so it may seem like a no-brainer to pick up a Switch 2. But in making this decision, there is unfortunately a constant looming threat of console prices going up, as we've seen happen with the 5-year-old hardware, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series consoles. Because of this, many players have rushed to pick up a Nintendo Switch 2 out of fear that the price will increase after its first holiday season. While it's anybody's guess if a price bump will actually come to pass, should you decide to pick up a Switch 2 6 months in this holiday season, you've already got plenty to play. And in the first few months of 2026, the system will be getting even more exclusives and hardware-pushing third-party releases. From Nintendo's publishing efforts, February 12th sees the release of a brand new Mario Tennis title, Mario Tennis Fever. March 5th brings Pokopia, a collaboration between Nintendo and Omega Force, the team who made Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2, basically Pokemon Cross Minecraft. If you're looking for heavy-hitter third-party titles, a discounted port of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is hitting the console in January, looking even better than the base PlayStation 4 version of the game, which launched in 2020. February will have Capcom bringing Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, Resident Evil Village, and the brand new Resident Evil Requiem to the device day and date. So what do you think of the Nintendo Switch 2 6 months after its launch? Are you still playing the system as much as you were when it came out? What's your favorite thing you played on it so far? And if you haven't picked up a Switch 2 yet, is there a game that would make you go to a store and get one immediately? Be sure to let us know your thoughts on the first 6 months of the Switch 2. For more on Nintendo and the world of gaming, be sure to stay tuned to GameRant.com.